Base, can we get back up in 560 now?
Chill out, dude. Taking it. No. Come with me. All right, don't. I get it. Your arm, take it.
Chill out. Chill out.
This is Deshaun Brown, a 20-year-old from Ohio who stabbed his ex-girlfriend 11 times in the neck, lived with her decomposing body for 5 days, then threw her 3-year-old son alive into the freezing Ohio River, all because she had a miscarriage.
Talk. Say hi. Talk. Wave. Say hi. Say bye-bye.
Cincinnati 911, what is the address of your emergency?
I found a dead body. Somebody threw a bag, like on the edge of the bridge, and my curiosity got the best of me, so I got up there and knocked it down, and it was heavy. It hit the ground. It's like a body bag.
On December 12, 2020, a security guard working near Cincinnati's Purple People Bridge made a discovery that would haunt him forever. The guard initially thought what he found might be Halloween props, but one touch told him everything he needed to know. Inside that bag was the body of 29-year-old Nitisha Lattimore, a certified nurse and devoted single mother. She had been stabbed 11 times in the neck and her carotid artery severed, but the horror didn't end there. Nitisha's 3-year-old son, Nilo, was missing. The little boy who family members described as inseparable from his mother, the child who would hold her face and shower her with kisses, was nowhere to be found. All that remained was his empty stroller recovered from the Ohio River and a Paw Patrol blanket stained with his blood. Within hours, Cincinnati police had zeroed in on a suspect, Deshaun Brown, Nitisha's ex-boyfriend who had been temporarily staying in her Walnut Hills apartment. What investigators would uncover over the next several hours of interrogation would reveal a crime so calculated, so heartless, that it would shake the Cincinnati community to its core. But before we get to the chilling details of how this all unfolded, let me take you back to where Deshaun Brown and Nitisha Lattimore's paths first crossed, and the red flags that were there all along. Nitisha, born on November 8, 1991, was known for her infectious smile and energetic personality. Her family described her as smart, talkative, and someone who could light up any room she entered. She worked as a certified nurse, a profession that reflected her caring nature. She was a devoted mother, not just to Nilo, but to at least 2 other sons as well. Her aunt Nicole Hunter, who often babysat Nilo, remembered the special bond between mother and son, and they had what she called a great personality together, always inseparable. Deshaun Brown, born around 1999 or 2000, was originally from Montgomery County, Ohio. At the time of the murders, he was just 20 years old. He met Nitisha on the dating app Tinder, and they began a relationship. But when that relationship ended, Nitisha made a decision that her family believes ultimately cost her and her son their lives. In an act of kindness, she allowed Deshaun to stay temporarily in her apartment until he could find his own place. Her uncle Marlon Hunter would later explain that Nitisha was fiercely independent. She didn't need Brown financially or emotionally, and made it clear that this was a temporary arrangement, nothing more. But that independence, that refusal to need him, may have been exactly what set Brown off. Because, according to investigators, Brown had begun harboring a deep, festering resentment toward Nitisha. At some point before December 2020, Nitisha had been pregnant with Brown's child, but she suffered a miscarriage, and Cincinnati police detective Kimberly Kelly would later testify in court that Brown viewed this miscarriage as Nitisha killing his baby. Miscarriages are natural biological events, something that happens in 15 to 20% of known pregnancies and is never the fault of the mother. But Brown twisted this into an act of murder in his mind. A witness would later report to authorities that Brown had been discussing plans to kill both Nitisha and Nilo for up to 2 months before he actually carried it out. And the timeline that prosecutors would later lay out shows just how calculated Brown's actions truly were. On December 4th, 2020, Nitisha and Nilo were last seen alive in their apartment, and by the next day, everything changed. Neighbors reported hearing sounds of a struggle coming from Nitisha's apartment. Inside, Brown attacked Nitisha with a knife, stabbing her repeatedly in the neck. The blood loss was so severe that it leaked through the floor into the apartment below. But Brown wasn't done, because for at least 5 days, possibly 6, Brown lived in that apartment with Nitisha's decomposing body. Think about that for a second. While a young mother's body lay dead in the next room, Brown went about his daily routine. He stripped the beds, researched online how to clean bloodstains, and attempted to scrub away the evidence of what he'd done. But perhaps most disturbingly, he accessed Nitisha's phone and began posting on her Facebook account, pretending to be her. One of those posts read, "I love him forever, Deshaun Brown." He was using her death to craft a narrative, make it look like everything was fine, all while her lifeless body lay in the same apartment. But what about Nilo? What happens to that innocent 3-year-old? The very next morning after killing Nitisha, on December 6th, Brown turned his attention to the child. Let me repeat that. Brown placed little Nilo in his stroller and wheeled him to the Purple People Bridge in downtown Cincinnati, and then in the early morning hours, with the Ohio River below freezing cold, he threw that child, still alive and breathing, over the side of the bridge. The stroller went with him. Phone records would later show that Brown had been searching online for information about Cincinnati bridges. He planned where to dispose of the child, researched the best location, and then he carried it out. Despite extensive searches of the Ohio River spanning 180 miles across 3 states, Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, Nila's body has never been recovered. All that was ever found was his empty stroller pulled from the water on December 13th, and that Paw Patrol blanket with his blood on it found with his mother's body. For 5 more days after murdering a 3-year-old, Brown continued living in Nitisha's apartment with her corpse. He maintained his sick charade on her Facebook. He continued his internet searches, this time looking for body bags. And on December 11th, he found what he was looking for. He purchased a body bag on eBay. That night, surveillance cameras captured Brown carrying a large white bag and blanket over his shoulder as he left the apartment building. He ordered an Uber, and when the driver arrived and saw the heavy bag, Brown had his story ready.
For the next several days, he lived on Melrose with Nitisha's body. There was so much blood in that apartment that the blood leaked into the apartment below, where it was later collected, and turned out to be Nitisha's blood.
According to the prosecution, Brown purchased a body bag on eBay shortly after he ordered an Uber ride. It took him here to the Purple People Bridge, where he dumped Nitisha's body. The next day, the prosecution says, Brown took her son Nilo to the Purple People Bridge and threw him into the Ohio River while the 3-year-old was still alive.
The driver would later tell police that Brown seemed distressed, that he smelled of alcohol, and that when asked about the bag, Brown claimed it contained clothes from a fight he'd had with his girlfriend. The driver had no idea he was transporting a corpse to the same bridge where days earlier Brown had thrown a living child into the river. At the Purple People Bridge, Brown attempted to throw Nitisha's body over the side, but the bag got stuck on a ledge. Hours later, at 3:30 in the morning on December 12th, that security guard we heard from earlier would discover it.
Guard told a dispatcher he first thought it was Halloween props, but one touch and he knew it was real.
The Hamilton County coroner would confirm that the body was mummified, meaning Nitisha had been dead for several days before being dumped. By noon on December 12th, police had declared Nitisha's apartment a crime scene. Blood spatter covered the walls and the child's bed sat empty with sheets stripped away. Deshaun Brown was taken into custody, and what followed was a 10-hour interrogation, and the footage from that interrogation, later released to the public, shows detectives systematically dismantling every lie Brown tried to tell. Detectives confronted him with phone records showing he'd posted on Nitisha's Facebook after her death. They challenged his claim that he'd spoken to her that very morning. "Why did you tell me that you talked to her today? She's been dead for like 5 or 6 days," one detective pressed. "This ain't ghost hunters." And when asked about Nilo's location, Brown offered nothing but evasive responses. "See, how am I going to know that?" he said. But the detectives already knew, and the evidence was overwhelming. The legal proceedings that followed would drag on for nearly 5 years, marked by delays, competency hearings, and one explosive moment that captured the absolute anguish of a family destroyed.
Tonight, a new motive revealed for the killings of a 3-year-old and his mother. Deshaun Brown is accused of murdering Nitisha Lattimore and her son Nilo in 2020. Reporter Courtney Francisco joins us live now. And Courtney, detectives say this motive could have stemmed from a miscarriage that woman had?
That's the story a detective told the judge on the stand today. "We were here for a hearing on 2 things, for the accused killer's bond and his interrogation video. And when I called Nilo's father to let him know I had an update, he told me when he answered the phone he was hoping so much that someone had found his son."
Brown was initially charged with Nitisha's murder on December 12, 2020. And by February 2021, prosecutors added a second count of aggravated murder for Nilo, despite his body never being recovered. He also faced charges for gross abuse of a corpse and tampering with evidence. This was a death penalty case, one that Hamilton County prosecutor Joe Dieters and later Connie Pillage promised to pursue to its fullest extent. But the road to justice hit multiple roadblocks because Brown's defense team claimed he was not mentally competent to stand trial. Mental health evaluations diagnosed him with personality and bipolar disorders. But here's where things get interesting. After, multiple psychologists who evaluated Brown concluded that he was faking his symptoms. One psychologist testified that Brown deliberately slowed his speech to appear disorganized, mumbled inconsistently, and avoided eye contact in ways that seemed calculated rather than genuine. He claimed to hear voices telling him to harm himself, which are classic signs of severe mental illness. But when observed over a 20-day stay at Summit Behavioral Health, his behaviors were inconsistent with real psychiatric disorders. He also admitted to using K2, synthetic marijuana, daily while in jail, which defense attorneys tried to attribute to his erratic behavior. But on September 5, 2025, Judge Leah Dinkelhocker ruled that Brown was competent to stand trial, and the trial was scheduled for October 6th. But before it could begin, something happened that would spare the Lattimore family from years of appeals and emotional trauma. But let me back up for a moment, because there's a court moment from June 2022 that I need to tell you about. A moment that went viral and captured the absolute devastation this case caused. On June 23, 2022, Brown appeared in court for a hearing on whether his taped confession to police could be used as evidence. The judge ultimately ruled that the confession was admissible. As the proceedings were wrapping up, Nilo's father, Antonio Hughes, who had been sitting in the courtroom, suddenly lunged at Brown from behind.
We'll take a look at this video here as a court hearing turns violent today. The man accused of stabbing a mother to death and throwing her toddler in the Ohio River was attacked by that toddler's father. Deshaun Brown was in court for a motions hearing today. A judge allowed the use of Brown's taped confessions to the killings of Nilo and Nitisha Lattimore as evidence. But as those proceedings were wrapping up, Nilo's father, Antonio Hughes, came up behind the defendant and then punched him repeatedly. That's what you're looking at right there. 2 deputies wrestled Hughes to the ground. He was still struggling as backup arrived to take him out of the courtroom.
Hughes punched Brown repeatedly in the head and neck before deputies wrestled him to the ground. Even as backup arrived to restrain him, Hughes continued struggling. He was removed from the courtroom, charged with contempt of court, and sentenced to 7 days in jail, though he was released early after serving part of his sentence. Could you blame him? This man was sitting in a courtroom listening to details about how the defendant allegedly murdered his young son and threw that child alive into a freezing river. But Antonio Hughes wasn't the only family member who wanted Brown to face the ultimate consequences for what he'd done. Nitisha's father, Roderick Lattimore, has been vocal from the beginning about his desire to see Brown receive the death penalty.
Deshaun Brown deserves nothing less than the death penalty. That's exactly what you deserve. No mercy at all.
Now, before I tell you how this case concluded, I need you to understand something important. What happened to Nitisha and Nilo wasn't an isolated incident. Across the United States, there's a disturbing pattern of domestic violence cases where children become victims of their parents' rage and where bodies are disposed of in waterways. In fact, just 40 miles from where Nilo was thrown into the Ohio River, another eerily similar case unfolded in Middletown, Ohio in 2021. A young boy, James Hutchinson, was killed by his mother, Brittany Gosney, and her boyfriend, James Hamilton. Hamilton had reportedly pressured Gosney to eliminate her children so they could focus on their relationship. Gosney drove James to a wildlife area where he clung to her minivan as she sped away, dragging him to his death. His body was then thrown into the Great Miami River, a tributary of the Ohio River, and like Nilo, James's body has never been recovered. But the pattern extends beyond Ohio. In Tuscarawas County, Ohio, in August 2025, an Amish mother named Ruth Miller was charged with aggravated murder after throwing her young son, Vincent, at Atwood Lake. Miller claimed God had instructed her to give him to God as a test of faith. While the motive differed, spiritual delusions rather than personal vendetta, the method was chillingly similar, a parent throwing their child into water. These cases reveal a horrifying truth. Domestic violence doesn't just target the immediate partner, it extends to children, to unborn babies, to anyone connected to the primary victim. On September 10, 2025, after nearly 5 years of waiting, the Lattimore case finally reached its conclusion. Deshaun Brown stood before Judge Leah Dinkelauker and pled guilty to 2 counts of aggravated murder. The other charges, gross abuse of a corpse and tampering with evidence, were dismissed as part of the plea agreement. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and the death penalty was taken off the table. Hamilton County Prosecutor Connie Pillich released a statement saying, "These ruthless acts have left an indelible mark on our community." Deshaun Brown's decision to plead guilty spares the Lattimore family the pain of a lengthy trial and potential appeals. Today, we have ensured justice for both Nitisha and Nilo. Brown declined to speak at his sentencing. Instead, he sat there, disengaged, as victim impact statements were read. As Roderick Lattimore stood and addressed him directly, the pain in his voice was unmistakable. After the sentencing, Roderick told Brown exactly how he felt. "You had no right to put your hands on my daughter and murder my daughter and my grandson the way you did. That's where you need to go. Go to hell." Roderick has spoken openly about the toll this case has taken on his family. He's talked about how his wife's death, which he believes was at least partly caused by the heartbreak of losing her daughter and grandson, has compounded their grief. He's described sleepless nights spent thinking about what happened to them, wishing he could have been there to stop it. As of today, Brown remains incarcerated with no appeals filed. Nilo's body has never been found. His Charlie Project profile remains active, listing him as missing with foul play suspected. Nitisha was laid to rest at Spring Grove Cemetery in Cincinnati, where her memorial inscription honors her loving memory. The family held vigils for Nitisha and Nilo. They organized searches along the Ohio River, hoping against hope that Nilo's body might be found. On what would have been Nilo's 5th birthday in March 2022, Roderick's brother Marlon spoke about the impossibility of healing from such a loss. He said, "You can never heal nothing like this, never," remembering how Nilo loved potato chips, balloons, and cartoons like Sesame Street. The Lattimore family continues to honor Nitisha and Nilo through prayer, sharing stories, and holding memorials. What do you think about this case? Should Nitisha never have housed Brown? Let me know what you think in the comments section. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.